Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing for Thursday, the 16th of May. I'm Derek Clark, and I'm joined this morning by Joshua Barry. How's it going, Joshua?
It's going okay, Derek. We are here to debrief a season where Rangers have not won the league, and in the 3 years I've been covering Rangers, I've done that 3 times, so we're well rehearsed in this show.
Unfortunately, Rangers losing the league title once again, and as Joshua mentioned, we're going to divulge where it was lost for Rangers this season. I'm sure there's various points where we can point to that Rangers really failed to grasp the opportunity. But before we look into that, just a quick word for our podcast sponsors, MPH Boilers. You know the drill by now. They've got some brilliant Viessmann boilers on offer. The all-important links are in the description below. They throw in a free internet controller for all you gadget lovers out there. You've got a first-year service free and flexible finance options as well. Right, the league was secured by Celtic last night. Dismantled Kilmarnock by 5-0 at Rugby Park. There was a few comments over the last couple of days suggesting if Kilmarnock win 1-0, if St Mirren win 1-0, and Rangers win by 3 at Tynecastle, then the league trophy will be nestling into the Ibrox trophy room once again. But unfortunately, that won't be the case. It has been a roller coaster of a season, it's fair to say. Another managerial change back in October. Philippe Clement really got an immediate reaction from the team after a disastrous start under Michael Beal before it all sort of unravelled in the business end of the campaign. Rangers started off this season. I think there was a bit of optimism, Joshua, perhaps, given a raft of signings that came into the club at the time. But that was all evaporated. And I think pre-season there was warning signs there. We go to Rugby Park and Rangers are lacklustre. They're poor, and they kick off the season with a defeat away to Kilmarnock, behind the 8 ball already.
Obviously, this time last year, the league had been wrapped up before the split, wasn't it? And there was a fair amount of optimism. I think there was generally optimism building because people were sick and tired, probably, of watching a very similar team over a number of years, Derek. And the prospect of change was exciting. Michael Beal obviously spoke a lot about that and gave Rangers supporters, I think, a lot of reasons to be optimistic. And a lot of the business did look exciting, I think, in a large part as well, because it was different. He has spoken in hindsight about making too many changes in one summer at Rangers. Obviously, 9 players came in to the club, and none of them really, aside from Jack Butland, hit the ground running. And the Kilmarnock game, I remember that in the second half of that game, just thinking, because Rangers had started poorly, and you were wondering, okay, are we going to see a different side after halftime? And it just never really materialised. And that did set the tone, because you've only got so many performances like that and results in you if you're going to win a league title. And there wasn't much, if anything, to hold on to. There was these questions about Beal's style that started to increase at the start of the season. I don't think we're there as much at the end of last season, but how much of that to do was with the amount of changes he made, who knows? But it was, again, a repetitive cycle of Rangers struggling to break teams down, crossing the ball a lot, and never really, apart from a set piece here or there, threatening to actually score against Kilmarnock. You then lose. I think Rangers lost 3 games in their opening 8 league games. Yeah. The key one for me, Derek, is the Old Firm at home. It was a game where, even as poor as Rangers were, they still had more than enough opportunities, and Celtic were in a bad moment. And if Rangers had been able to win, it would have changed the narrative. But they've not this season been able to do that. And Old Firms is what stands out to me, Derek. I know we'll come on to talk about, I'm sure, the Ross County game, and we'll talk about the Motherwell game at home. But outside of Old Firm games, I think Celtic and Rangers' record is pretty similar in terms of the points they've dropped to other teams. Neither Celtic and Rangers, I think, are brilliant teams at the moment. Celtic have, I think, more quality, and that's shown at the end of the season. But it's the fact that Rangers haven't been able to win any single Old Firm game has left them with this significant points disadvantage compared to their direct rivals, and that's why the league title's obviously been wrapped up by Celtic last night, as you say.
Yeah, don't deserve to win the league if you can't beat your rivals, for me. Before we crack on, Andrew Webster says, what top you wearing today, Derek? Is a vintage Croatia jersey, buddy. So I'm channeling my inner Dado Purcell, how I would love him up top for Rangers these days. As Joshua mentioned, 3 defeats in the opening 8 games. It spelled the end of Michael Beal in charge of Rangers. The Aberdeen game at Ibrox was toxic. I remember watching you and Johnny were at the game, Joshua, at the time, and it was as toxic an atmosphere, I think, as we've seen at Ibrox in quite some time. And quite rightly, for me, Beal should have went after the Celtic game. I think, I know for me that the Kemar Roofe goal should have stood. That may have changed the course of the match. But losing that game, for me, his time was up then. He was allowed to sort of stumble along, Rangers defeating St Johnstone, and then Motherwell narrowly before that Aberdeen result came crashing down on Michael Beal. And I think couldn't see him lasting after that. Joshua, do you think he maybe should have went before?
I remember watching the Motherwell game, and I was on holiday in I can't remember exactly where it was, in somewhere in Greece, and we were watching the game. A number of other people. It was at a wedding actually when we were watching the game with some others over there. And the Betis game had been on the Thursday, and that was a good performance. Obviously, Rangers had won, and you started to think, okay, is there? Because let's not pretend that this time last year Beal had been able to build optimism for a reason. And I think a lot of that was he was able to sell his project well, but also the football at this time last season after the split was pretty good. The argument is they couldn't get over the line in Old Firm games, and the pressure wasn't on. And that's a key point. But there was a reason he was able to build optimism going into the summer. I remember watching that Motherwell game, and it was Ravi Matondo got injured quite early on, and he'd started to come on to show a bit of form for Rangers at the start of that season. And then obviously Suter came on, and Rangers were playing with kind of a back 5 and a midfield 4 at the end of the game. And that's when I think he thought that there isn't legs in this this season, and Rangers are going to have to make a change if they want to get something out of this season. And you're right there at the Aberdeen game, probably the most toxic game at Ibrox I can remember in recent memory. And so much of that had to do with the fact that supporters believed or were led to believe this was going to be a new start, and actually it turned out materialised. The start of that campaign was even worse than the season before. And the key point in the overall season for me, Derek, is look, Rangers now, as we've spoken about a lot over the last week or so, seem as if they're trying to rectify the recruitment structure. That's what all the noises suggest. That's what they've also said publicly. This time last year, it was still a manager-led recruitment operation because, the sporting director and Ross Wilson had gone. There was a lot of change at board level. There wasn't many figures of continuity at any level of within the club from a kind of footballing point of view. That is the overall point from me. It's not just that players were only signed by Michael Beal and they could only play in his team. But if you look around world football, there's a reason that clubs have these long-term structures now because of the short-term cycles of managers. Rangers have had a summer rebuild last summer in a certain manager's image, and I think that comes into signings like Lammers or Cifuentes, who were signed quite specifically to play quite specific roles within that system. And then they've had to try and get the most out of that season with a different manager using a very specific squad of players, notably with no white players. I think that's the key conversation. That's how I would sum up this season. Clement has done well to get where he did, still not been able to get over the line in Old Firm games. But while Rangers while it does look like they're changing their recruitment strategy, they've still paid the price for what happened this time last year when Michael Beal was really at the front of that summer rebuild, was really spearheading that summer rebuild, and then 8 games into the season, he was gone. And then what do you do with that squad?
Yeah, Beal departed. Stephen Davis took interim charge, and after the debacle in Cyprus, he did well to round off his 2 games in charge with a 3-0 win in Paisley against St Mirren. Clement came in and got an upturn in results and performances. The Rangers looked more organised. There was smiles on faces again, and the first real stumble came at Pittodrie. Rangers drawing 1 apiece. They were trailing in that game for quite some time. Tavernier with a stoppage time penalty, and then that big moment for Sam Lammers immediately after Joshua to seal the victory. And for me, he has to burst the net. I know you think it's a bit of a more difficult chance than he was berated for at the time. But that is another game where Rangers dropped points. They won every single domestic fixture up until the Celtic game at Parkhead, losing by 2-1. Of course, Rangers reduced to 10. Balogun sent off in the second half. Another case of where Rangers started playing once they went 2-0 down. Tavernier with that late goal, and they just couldn't find that decisive equalising goal. So it was an opportunity that day, I think, for Rangers to really, was it to go top of the league, or was it to close the gap? Because Rangers did have a game in hand, I think, after that, to actually go top of the table at that point. So
they'd had the Ross County game called off.
Yes,
a couple of days before, when Ross County couldn't get down the 9. So that was the that was the chance that stands out to me. The Lammers chance that stands out to me, Derek, is the chance in the Old Firm game. And you look at the goal. You look at the goals that Lammers has scored. I know they've slowed up in the last couple of weeks, but over the course since going back to the Eredivisie, and then you consider that and compare it to that chance in the first Old Firm game of the season when Raskin played the ball forward, I think, and Lammers did everything right in terms of his run, taking the ball around the keeper, and then somehow puts it wide. That is the most consequential miss for me, as is the miss he made in the home game against Servette, because Rangers had an opportunity to go 3-0 up when he missed more or less an open goal against Servette at home. And if that had happened, I think that would have gone some way to rebuilding the mood in the first few weeks of the season that had been so badly impacted naturally by that Kilmarnock loss. And in the Aberdeen game, Balogun, remember, has those 2 headers, one of which is saved at close range by the keeper, and one of which I think crashes off the crossbar. So, but you're right, up until that point, and the Old Firm at New Year was somewhat of a missed opportunity, because in the last 2 Old Firm games, I think there's been far more of a gap in the midfield in particular, as we've gone on about. Even the 3-3 game at home in that first half, Celtic could have been out of sight, and Rangers, we've seen that 2-1 game a couple of weeks ago, last week, we've seen that play out on so many occasions. The one at New Year, I think there was more in that for Rangers. Obviously, the Cyril Dessers moment, which we almost can't call a miss because he didn't take a shot. Such was how bad was the execution on that occasion. However, you take it forward up until the games, the next point there, the Kilmarnock and the Hearts games, which were seen as, if Rangers can get through that, then why can't they be champions? Because they've already demonstrated they can win all the other games aside from the Old Firm, and that was always the big thing that was hanging over them. I believe they'd won 18 out of 20 games after they went and beat Kilmarnock away from home. That was also the night that Oscar Cortez got injured. That was just after Abdallah Sima had been injured, and it was around the time that Ridvan Yilmaz would go away on international duty and get injured. And I think that is the key juncture in the season where it started to fall apart domestically for Clermont and Rangers.
Yep. Injuries started to rack up, of course. Rangers would manage to go top, joint top. I remember that win against Ross County. Wins an impressive win away to St Johnstone, the 5-0 demolition of Hearts, and then the comeback win after at Rugby Park against Kilmarnock. Tom Lawrence with a beauty in that game. Rangers holding on to win by 2-1. And you're thinking this team is capable of going on and winning the title. I was one. Clermont had me believing that Rangers would go on and win the league. However, brought crashing down to earth that big weekend, pivotal weekend at the start of March. Rangers hosted Motherwell, Joshua, and Celtic going away to Tynecastle the following day. An opportunity to open up a 5-point gap at the top of the table. Rangers failed to do that. Celtic would go on, of course, and failed to reclaim top spot at that time. We can all discuss about the fact that Casey should have been sent off for his tackle in Ross McCausland. Rangers should have been good enough to win that game at home to Motherwell. They bounced back, won against Hibs, and then, of course, it was Old Firm time, the 3-3 draw with Celtic at the time. It was sort of a weird reaction afterwards, I think, in such a terrible start in that game. That you were happy to take a point, given that when Abdallah Sima equalised, Adam Ida replied immediately after, but Rabbi Matondo with what turned out to be the goal of the season. But again, is that another missed opportunity? Rangers with a great chance to defeat Celtic for the first time in the season. Followed that up with 2 of the worst displays of the campaign away to Ross County. Dreadful, losing that game. And then to follow that up with a meagre, pitiful showing at Dens Park against Dundee, where absolutely nothing happened really cost Rangers. I think those 2 games for me, Josh, are more than anything else. We heard from Dujon Sterling at Dens Park afterwards. I think he was honest, and credit to him. He didn't beat about the bush, and he criticised the team and the belief, he said, it wasn't there within the dressing room. So for me, that was a point where I felt that the league was done and dusted for another season, unfortunately.
Yeah, so as just mentioned, Rangers won 18 out of their first 20 in the league under Clement. And then, if I'm doing my quick maths correctly, they only won 3 out of the next 8. And that is around the time, the last time that Ridvan and Tavernier started together before Tuesday night's game against Dundee, I believe was was Rangers' home defeat under Motherwell. They might have started one more in between that, but I think that was the last time they'd started together, which was February the 24th. The last time that Rangers started with 2 wingers was away at Kilmarnock, which was February the 28th. So people will say, look, Rangers still should have had enough to get through the drop points and get through the games that they weren't able to. And I think that's true, and we'll come on to that. But simultaneously, that's when Clement's off-ball structure, which is what he spoke about after the Dundee game, the way that Rangers were giving up chances, that's when that started to deteriorate, easy for me to say, because the way that the squad had been fashioned, as mentioned, didn't have wingers. Rabbi Matondo's pretty injury prone. Abdal Sima, as it has materialised in the second half of the season, has had very similar issues. Oscar Cortez came in and was injured. And behind that, obviously, Ross McCausland was injured by that Casey tackle, as you mentioned, Derek. Behind that, Rangers have not had any depth out wide. Ridvan Yilmaz, you only had to watch the first half or the first 60 minutes of the game against Dundee. He's clearly one of Rangers' best technical players and one of their better players. You take him out of there, you have to play Dujon Sterling elsewhere. You talk about the counter-attacking moments that Rangers were conceding before they went up to Ross County. And against Ross County, they conceded the highest value of opportunity that they had in any point in the previous 6 seasons. So that's how bad that defensive performance was. And if you look at what Clement said the other night in relation to his team switching off, Derek, he commented, it was the angriest I think we've seen him in a press conference, and he effectively said, look, the players can't rely on me to get them going at halftime. And that is not something that is unique to Clement. We've heard similar messages come out from different managers. Obviously, under Michael Beal, especially at the start, Rangers had to go behind pretty frequently before they really started to play. And that comment for me sums up the Ross County game, because mentality questions have surrounded this Rangers team domestically for a long time. For me, watching on that day up at Dingwall, there was a complacency that's what worked against them, because they did get their way into a lead. They should have made that 2-0. They had to rely on a couple of Ross County misses and a couple of Butland saves in the first half, but they weren't really able to heed that warning. I think Clement made the substitutions too late, bringing Silva and Barisic off that day, which he did at 2-1. But it was that complacency, that inability to, as he himself said, don't take it from me, take it from what Clement said in his press conference the other day, to be on it at every moment, on and off the ball. That is what he demands. And I don't think he's got a squad yet that has been able to do it, which is why you saw the drop points against Ross County. That's what really destabilised Rangers, because even though they were conceding a lot of chances at Hibs, they managed to get through that game at home, even though they dropped points against Motherwell. Celtic obviously dropped points away at Tynecastle that day, but their luck was kind of up when it came to that Ross County game away from home, and then they were unable to, as you say, get over the line in that Dundee game, which was a game that you wouldn't remember for much else apart from the significance of the result, because not much happened. And again, Rangers needed something to happen because they needed a win to get back into some sort of rhythm that night.
Yeah, it left Rangers needing to defeat Celtic at Parkhead and hope for a goal difference swing. And we all know what unfolded at the weekend. Many predicted that Rangers would fall to defeat, and unfortunately that is how the game went. John Lundstrom with a first half of a real shambolic nature, and Rangers facing that uphill mountain to climb, as they have done at Parkhead so often in recent years, and Celtic wrapping up the league last night. Of course, there is one match remaining. Rangers will go to Tynecastle on Saturday, and it's what might have been, I think, but at the business end of the season, Rangers, their mentality was called into question, and unfortunately they were unable to stand up to the pressure. That is the sad reality of it. Big thanks to James Strachan, who's donated to the channel. Says, I'm so angry they're benefiting from how good we've performed in Europe. They get automatically into the Champions League. Needed to spend on a proven goal scorer. Do you think the Rangers not buying a proven goal scorer in the January transfer window has come back to bite Rangers at the time. I know there was a lot of concerns, Joshua, that failure to buy not even just a Lawrence Shankland, but someone who is prolific in front of goal to take the onus off Cyril Dessers really could have pushed Rangers on to win the title. Do you think that's cost them?
I think Dessers has generally done well since the turn of the year. Since January, I've not got his numbers to hand, but I would guess he's still up there, first or second in terms of the goals he scored for 90 minutes. Now, I know people will be shouting at their TVs at home for me saying that, but Rangers did not have the money to go and get Lawrence Shankland.
No.
Think how much Shankland is worth to Hearts for that third place finish. And I'll say just now, we're going to have a detailed piece on the website, hopefully today, that explains the coefficient reality for Rangers, how much money they'll get, what the different circumstances are. So keep an eye out for that. One of many things you get with a subscription to the website. Rangers didn't have 5-6 million to go and shell out in the January transfer window. Fabio Silva came in and has played a lot of his football, I think, out of position. He's also had bad moments, not denying that whatsoever. But it's been for me, it's been the injuries to other positions, Derek, specifically the wide areas, and as well players like Ridvan, which has just impacted Rangers' performance overall, which have led to them conceding more chances. I think that comment is spot on. I've got a trend line here, which I'll explain to people very quickly, Derek, that shows this pretty effectively. The green line is the expected goals, the chances that Rangers have created. The kind of pinky purple line is chances they've conceded. The quality of it is a 10-game rolling average. If you just look at the kind of final fifth or quarter of the chart, look at how the green line is dipped and the purple line has gone up. That's been Rangers' issue. It's not. It has been, yes, if they had better players, of course, up front, if they had more depth up front, if they hadn't had to play Cyril Dessers at every moment of every game. If they'd been able to sign someone like Shankland, would their chances have been better? Absolutely. But they've conceded so many opportunities in the last 2 months, comparably to the 6 months really before that, or 5 months before that, while creating a lower quality of chance themselves. So the wheels have kind of come off. The injuries have caught up with them at the wrong time. That's been the key issue for me, is the underlying numbers have worked against them. They've not had depth in really any area of the squad, and that came to pass obviously last week when Clement said he had 11 injuries. The hope now for him and other people will be that Rangers are able to get a fitter squad and ahead of the Scottish Cup final. I actually thought, and I missed this at the press conference, Derek, reading it back, he made a comment about the medical staff and the medical, maybe not the medical staff, sorry, but the medical approach he's taken. I think it was a question that Chris asked in relation to, is there one thing that you would change, maybe if you could go back to October? There's clearly going to be significant change in how Rangers deal with injuries in their overall approach to that department and that area, because it's been something that has worked against them for so long. They cannot afford, as a club, to have so many players out injured. I'm not saying anything particularly dramatic in suggesting that, but that has really worked against them. Yeah, really worked against them in the last couple of months of the season.
Yeah, and needs an absolute overhaul in the summer. Let's get to a few of the points that are coming in. Just incidentally, those of you that are Rangers Review Extra members, I'll be on with Ali Bean at 1 p.m. UK time this afternoon, so we hope you can join us for that. Get your questions in, and we'll address as many as we can. I'll touch on some. Now, Dana Life, first of all, just deviate slightly to the Rangers Review program after the season finishes, lads. Yes, as always, we will be on every single day, buddy. Throughout the course of the summer. It will be a busy summer with players coming in and players departing. And there's a point coming in here from Andrew as well. Says Celtic have got 3 more points than us out with the Old Firm games. Shows you how big the Old Firm games were this season. And there's a point coming, of course, to touchdown Hearts. Next up for Rangers, Blazing Blue 72 says the positions now confirmed. Do we think both teams will play youth and those of minutes? I think we touched on this a bit yesterday.
I'm gonna pause you there because you're getting some complaints about your audio technology there, Derek. So I don't know if you need to quickly fix your mic as we.
Yep, apologies.
There we are. This is the production. Value. There we are. That's the word I'm looking for.
Do you know what it is? My mic stand broke, so I'm actually holding my microphone now. So it is a little bit.
Get a new one on. You need to get a new one on the expenses, I think, this week.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I was saying there, folks, before I went off air, There's a comment that came in from Blazing Blue 72, which says, with Rangers and Hearts positions now confirmed, do you think both teams will play youth and lows in need of minutes? So we touched on this a bit yesterday, Joshua. Of course, Rangers still have a massive game coming up next week against Celtic in that Scottish Cup final. I think my mic's going again. Is my mic okay, Joshua? Is that
okay for me?
Right, that's fine. Good stuff. So can you see many alterations for Saturday? Do you think it might be much of the same side that we've seen against Dundee during the week?
Yeah, it won't be the same type of team that we saw when Rangers played Hearts a couple of seasons ago before they went to Seville, because they were trying to rest their squad then. This time they need to build their squad up, and this time I would argue that if you look at the last Old Firm game, Derek, I wouldn't be surprised if 4 or 5 of those starting positions are different come the Scottish Cup final a week on Saturday. So it will be similar to the team that played against Dundee for me. Wouldn't be surprised if it's the exact same midfield. We'll obviously hear from Clement tomorrow to provide a bit of an injury update and see where certain players are on their return from injury, most notably the likes of Dujon Sterling, but expect to see Ben Davies play at Tynecastle, Nico Raskin, Todd Cantwell, players who obviously have come back into the fold a little bit more recently. Different situation to a couple of years ago when Rangers did need to rotate their squad. However, if there's 11 players out for Tuesday, how many of those in reality are going to be back for Saturday? So it might once more be a youthful bench. I'd be surprised if we're seeing a back 4 of Cole McKinnon, Tavernier, Davies and Robbie Fraser at Tynecastle, but you never know.
Yep, I'd like to see more of Robbie Fraser, I've got to say. I think he's more in the mould of Ridvan over on that left-hand side. I thought he did pretty well during the week. And who knows, we might see 1 or 2 of the young lads at Tynecastle. I think Cole McKinnon, I want to see more of, is another one. Others, Alex Lowry was on the bench, never came off, but we may see him. He scored a beauty at Tynecastle a couple of years ago, as did Cole McKinnon. Perhaps a pair of them can shine once again. Stephen Wark raises a point. We'll wrap up with this. He says, Derek, Joshua, is Kamar Roof left already? Going by his social media stuff, he posted on his Instagram account of him on what looks like a plane, I'd imagine, because there's an image of clouds outside the plane window. Would be surprised if he's given a few days off to go and see family, perhaps, or to go and maybe sort out his future, talk to potential suitors. He had a contract at the end of the season. What should we read into that, Joe? Should you think?
Yeah, I did see that, and I hadn't heard anything about that, so I was intrigued. Again, something that will be brought up at the press conference tomorrow, because Roof obviously come off the bench in recent weeks. He still remains Rangers' only real backup option up top, and he still could, score a significant goal in the Scottish Cup final, because you'd imagine that if Rangers were chasing the game, he would come on at some point. So again, one that will come up tomorrow. We know that he's leaving Rangers. We know that it's been clear for some time that he's going to leave Rangers. A really good player, but a player who's only started something like 6 times, or has only played 690 minutes, I believe, in the league for Rangers over the last couple of seasons. They can't afford to have significant wages, not play that many minutes. So one that's clearly going to be moving on in the summer, but a topic will be brought up with Clement tomorrow, undoubtedly, because, I was intrigued to see that pop up on my timeline yesterday.
Yeah, right. Folk are still saying my mic is having an absolute nightmare, so I think we'll wrap up there. I do apologise about the sound quality, folks. We'll try and get it rectified by the next time we're on. But thank you to you all for tuning in to this show this morning. And as I touched on earlier, we will be on. Well, myself and Ali will be on at 1:00 this afternoon. I'll pop the link in the community page on YouTube. So fire your questions in and we'll get through as many as we possibly can. Big thanks to Joshua for joining us as ever. And we'll speak to you a little later on. Bye for now.